Yeah, I love how when you hit the button on mine, it's only on mine because yours are stable,
Yeah.
but mine's like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Welcome back to the Balance for Life podcast. I'm Perry, this is Adam,
Hello.
and we are going to uncover the secrets of happiness and success with you. If you like what you hear, go ahead and hit that like button or 5-star review and help us out.
Yeah, and don't forget to join us on socials. We're on pretty much everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all at Balance Number 4 Life podcast, and then Twitter at Adam and Perry, spelled out and A-N-D. And you can also watch us on YouTube. Those of you that are, good for you. Those of you that aren't, check it out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So this week we are going to talk about our third pillar, which is spiritual health.
Yeah, and I think we need to point out too at this point, when we're talking about our 4 pillars, we don't have these in any particular order. I know we're talking first, second, third, but these really aren't in no particular order as far as importance goes, right?
Nope, just alphabetical, but random.
Okay, yeah. Perfect.
Randomly alphabetical order.
I like it.
So these are the questions that we're going to talk about and try to answer in this podcast episode. And the first one is, what does it mean to be spiritual?
We're also going to talk about the differences between spirituality and religion, because there is a difference there, I think.
And how does being spiritual relate to overall health? Of course, because every time we talk about a pillar, we want to loop it back into our overall health.
Absolutely. It's all about balance. All right. So the first question that we want to talk about, like you mentioned, is what is spirituality? So I found this quote. It was Dr. Maya Spencer with the Royal College of Psychologists. So psychologists talking about spirituality, that's, we're balanced here. And what she said basically is that spirituality is a sense or a belief or a feeling that there is something greater out there than you. It's something bigger, something grander, something that helps us to feel like there's more, right? And I think we're all wanting to find more. So spirituality, I think, really when we break it down, is basically our guiding sense of principles. So it's the guiding sense, it's the principles, it's the values that bring meaning into our life.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good summation. So one question is spirituality the same as religion, right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty common.
That's one of the things we want to talk about now. We are both religious, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm more religious or not, but
I don't know if you can really gauge how religious a person is.
Right.
I think we've made that joke, but I don't know that you can really gauge how spiritual or how religious.
Exactly. I think it's a very individual thing.
Yeah.
For me personally, at least, my religion is very important to me. I also recognize that you can be spiritual without religion. And I think it's important for everybody to be spiritual, whether you believe in God or not. Whatever your spirituality is, it's really important to hone in on that, right? And to be open-minded to other things. Like, as a religious person, I've tried my whole life to be open-minded to other people's religious beliefs, or people who aren't religious, their beliefs. And I think that you can learn something from anybody. And so being open-minded, I think, is very important.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. So organized religion often offers us a set of principles to guide us. Yeah. And so that's a benefit that organized religion can offer. Many of those are based on fundamental ideas such as belief in a higher power, helping or serving others, as well as adhering to established rules or guidelines.
Yeah, which I think those are all good things, right? I mean, belief in a higher power, that's kind of what we talked about, basically what spirituality is, helping, serving others. I think it's important to note that all religions are based in spirituality, but that doesn't necessarily mean that any specific religion is going to be more or less spiritual as far as our journey goes. So whatever, I think the key to remember is whatever your journey is, is just trying to find the highest level of spirituality within that.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about how spirituality relates to overall health.
Yeah,
And
I mean, we talked about balance, right? That's
right,
what we're trying to accomplish here.
Exactly. So number one, finding purpose in life. And I think you can find purpose in a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having a belief that there's something else, something greater than you, is really important in a lot of aspects. And we could talk about that in the other aspects, the other pillars that we have. So,
yeah,
physical health, for example, when you are part of a sports team, right? You have this belief that this team is greater than the individual. And I think having spirituality makes that easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that teamwork not only helps your team, but it also helps you to try to do your best physically,
yeah.
I think.
I think it's kind of interesting that you bring that up. We talk about being a team, right? And we've all heard there's no I in team. And I actually think it's kind of funny where we get our inspiration nowadays. But as you were talking about that, it reminded me of the Phineas and Ferb episode when they're talking about Dr. Doofenshmirtz. I think he was actually trying to be good in this episode, and he got with all the little O.W.C.A.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Things, animals, the agents, right?
Yeah.
He got with all the O.W.C.A agents, and he said there is no I in team, but there's an M and an E, and that spells me. And so I think when we talk about a team, right, we are talking about a group of individuals, and so it's this idea that we as individuals can become better when we're part of a team, and I think that's the idea of synergy. When we talk about synergy,
yeah,
I think it's the idea that when we bring our individual strengths together, it can increase the output of the team drastically, right? It's not a linear growth or a linear potential. It's exponential.
Mm-hmm.
We can add all of that, and we can come up with something that's greater than just the parts of the whole.
Definitely.
So
I think another way that spirituality and physical health go together is this idea that your body is a temple, right? A lot of, I believe the Bible says that, and a lot of religions have this guideline on what you should or shouldn't eat and how you should take care of your body. And I think there's a really important connection between how you physically feel and your ability to feel spiritual as well. You know, if you're taking care of your body, if you're trying to eat well overall and you're exercising, you just feel better in general, and that makes it easier to get in touch with your spirituality. And I think the opposite is true too. If you're getting in touch with your spirituality, I believe that makes you more likely to want to take care of your body. Absolutely. And to be physically healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, like you pointed out, if we are more spiritual, we're going to be following those rules of things that get the guidelines maybe that we talk about. Definitely. I think we are going to talk about our religion, right? I mean, we can't really talk about religion and spirituality without talking about our religion. So sure. I think we can talk about what we have, which is the word of wisdom. And within that, there are guidelines of, basically it just says things that are healthier, right? We shouldn't take anything into our body that's going to cause damage, physical damage. And so I think a lot of the guidelines that are placed by these religions, that is kind of the key aspect, is we don't want to take anything in that's harmful.
Right.
So,
and I've seen arguments on both sides of some of the things that are included in our word of wisdom or our guidelines of what we intake into our body. But the guiding principle behind that is to take care of our body.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the important thing to keep in mind too, is when we talk about these guidelines, right, we're some people take them a lot more literal. Some people will be a lot more to the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law, which is basically our religion tells us that we should take care of ourselves physically. And I think most Jewish religion has kosher diet, right? So I think with any religion, it's basically just take things in that are going to be beneficial and don't consume things that are going to be detrimental to your health. So, yeah, I think the spiritual and physical health is very important. Most religions and most spirituality is going to have guidelines set in place that are going to protect your physical body.
Definitely. And we've mentioned before that we think it's important to not go overboard with certain things. Now, there are some things I will not consume. I don't drink alcohol, and I never will. But I eat a lot of ice cream, and sometimes I should I feel like I should cut back on it, but I'm never going to totally stop eating ice cream. Okay,
absolutely. And I think when we talk about that, I think the key to remember is moderation. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, I know you can see what I'm drinking, those of you that are watching on YouTube. Some people won't drink caffeine at all, and some people will drink some. I've done some research myself and found what is a healthy amount to consume, and I try and limit myself to well below what that healthy amount is.
Sure.
So I think it's all about moderation. It's all about monitoring yourself and making sure that we are taking in those things. And I think, again, we can take it back to our word of wisdom and some things that people talk about with it. And I know coffee is another big one. I used to drink a lot of coffee, and I choose not to now both because of the religious aspect, but also because of what it was doing to my stomach at the time. It was causing some serious issues in my stomach, so I had to give up coffee. But that doesn't mean that I think less of anybody else. I've in the past, at my job, I've done some training work with other individuals, and I made sure there was fresh coffee there made for the employees that were coming through. And so I don't have a problem with anybody else drinking coffee. I choose not to myself, but I definitely have my own other options for getting my caffeine intake.
Basically, what we're not going to tell you is what religion you should be a part of, what religious principles you should follow or not. So we're not going to tell you don't drink alcohol. What we are going to say is moderation. Yeah. If you do drink alcohol, practice moderation. We think that's really important with everything. So
absolutely. I think that's the key, is just limiting, knowing your limits, and monitoring yourself to whatever standard is good and works for you.
Let's talk about mental health as well. I think spirituality is a great way. It really connects with your mental health, connects as far as building relationships go, especially if you belong to a religion or a group that has similar spirituality goals or guidelines. You have that social interaction, which is really important for your mental health, but also just this feeling that there's something else that's bigger than you, a higher power or fate or whatever you believe in. That belief can help us emotionally as we go through trials in life, as we struggle.
Absolutely. I think it puts into perspective how seemingly insignificant our trials might be when we consider that higher power as able to take some of that away from us, which a lot of religions, that's what they believe, right? Is that higher power can help you through that and can carry you along that journey. So
when our daughter Blakely passed away, I was obviously completely devastated, right? Religion, spirituality didn't make me not sad or devastated or totally depressed, but it really did help me through it. Now, it was a point in my life where I decided I needed to take a step back and evaluate whether or not I believed in the religion that I believed in, okay? What the conclusion that I came to was that if I believed in it when other people had lost their children, why should I stop believing in it when I lost my child? That was kind of the conclusion I came to. A lot of other factors in there as well, but my belief in a higher power really did help me to get to a place where I was emotionally stable again. And I think if you've lost someone really close to you like that, it's okay to be emotionally unstable for a period of time. Having religion or having any spirituality can really help you get back to that point, though, where you can continue to live, and you're always going to struggle from time to time. That's okay. but it really does help you in that mental health aspect of it.
Absolutely. And I think maybe not quite to the same extent, but with addictions. I've struggled with addiction myself, and probably many people that listen have had the same experience. And religion for me was a way to find strength in numbers, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Right? It was a way to find that support group to help through some of those really dark times. Anybody that's struggled with addiction knows that it can be very dark, and there are times when you don't know if it's even worth going on.
Yeah.
And religion and finding that support group is a way to help you through it. So
I'm going to say something that I don't know if you'll agree with or not. I'm curious to see if you do, and I don't know if everyone else will. I think that everybody struggles with addiction. I just think that some addictions are more devastating than others.
Mm-hmm.
And so some addictions maybe are things you should work on, but they're not going to ruin your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas others, they're not all created equally, but I think we all struggle with addiction.
Absolutely. I think I 100% agree with that, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's sex, whether it's whatever
Ice
it is.
cream.
Ice cream, sugar.
Seriously.
Right?
That is
caffeine.
a real thing.
Caffeine, I know if I don't have at least some caffeine during the day, I have really bad headaches. So that is still an addiction. And yeah, I think everybody in this world has some sort of addiction. Some people might even be addicted to social media or negativity or positivity or exercise. I think that the addiction is something that takes many different forms.
Yeah.
And it's, like you said, some of them are more visible, some of them are more prominent, and some of them can be more detrimental to you in a more public way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with that.
For me, the goal is just to identify what are my addictions,
Mm-hmm.
which ones should I tackle, which ones should I maybe save for later.
Absolutely.
And then, like we said, spirituality, belief in a higher power is a really powerful tool to help you overcome addiction. I think every addiction recovery group I've been a part of or that I've learned about is has a belief in some sort of higher power as a core principle to making it through that addiction. It's one of those important steps to recovery.
And I know those that I've actually attended. I mean, I'll be vulnerable here. I've attended a few different addiction recovery groups, and every one of them starts out the same way. And whether it's through an organized religion, because I've gone to church-sponsored addiction recovery groups, and I've gone to non-church-sponsored addiction recovery groups, and both of them started out the same way with reciting the Serenity Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of them, one of the steps in the 12-step program is acknowledging, recognizing that there is a higher power and giving your will up to that higher power.
Right.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, when we're talking about grief, I have worked with therapists that were church-sponsored and those that weren't as well. And every therapist I've worked with, which is only like maybe 4, but each of them has a belief in a higher power as a big part of what they do. And I don't think that's as common throughout therapy as it is throughout addiction recovery, maybe. But either way, I think spirituality as a part of therapy is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So mental health, let's see. We haven't really talked about financial health yet because we're going to next week. But I still think we can touch on how spirituality and financial health coexist and help each other. And the biggest thing that I think of is this idea that you should help others, that you should be charitable, and that giving of what you have earned helps you overcome greed or avoid greed. It actually helps you to appreciate what you have and be smarter with the decisions that you make. So I know, like Dave Ramsey, for example, he talks about one of his steps in building wealth is to give 10% of, I think he says 10% of what you've earned. And he goes into maybe a lot more detail than I'm going to right now about why that's important. But I think there's a very spiritual aspect behind giving of what you've received to help others who need help.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think along with that, it is the idea of giving. And when we think about law of attraction, we think about universality, all of these things. When we give, it actually brings back to us. So when you give that energy out into the universe, supposedly you're actually allowing those blessings to come back to you in greater, right? Even more so than what you're giving out. So I think, yeah, that absolutely has a spiritual aspect to it. I think along with that too, there is the discipline aspect of if you are giving that money first, and I know our religion says that should be at the very top of your budget, is donating that money very first, giving that money to God, giving that money to the needy, giving that money to whatever organization you donate to. But having that discipline teaches you, okay, well, this money's already gone, so I need to live with this much.
Right.
And it teaches you to live far below your means rather than going outside of what you're even bringing
Exactly.
in.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on that a lot more next week.
Absolutely, we will.
But that's super important.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about the social aspect of belonging to an organized religion. And I think that can also apply to any sort of spiritual group. But one of the things that our religion really strives to accomplish is getting to know each other and supporting each other and building each other up. So we have church organized get-togethers, barbecues, potlucks, game nights, sports events. We do a lot within our church that really helps. I know when we moved into this house, which was less than a year ago, it did not take very long for us to feel like we knew our neighborhood well. And that's one of the things I love about our church. And I'm sure that a lot of other churches and religions and groups have this as well.
Absolutely.
But we felt really quickly like people cared about getting to know us, and it was easy to get to know people because we went to, the Halloween chili potluck, right? And you have these different events that help you get to know each other. And so you have both the spiritual and social, mental aspect of health there together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something to be said too, even just for the weekly gatherings.
Yeah.
Right? Weekly congregations. So whatever it is you're doing, most organized religions are going to meet on a regular basis. And I know one of the things here in Utah, so we're based in Utah County, and I know one of the things that I hear from people who are not members of our church is how difficult it is to make friends or meet people if you don't go to church on Sundays, because that's where most of the neighborhoods are getting together, where most of the people are getting to know each other. And so it's a little more difficult outside of that to make friends. It's not impossible. And there's been times in my life where I was not active in the church and I was still able to meet people and still able to make friends. And
you have to try a little harder.
You have to try a little harder, but it is still possible. So don't take it that way.
Yeah, exactly. I think most people are wanting to be friends with other people that don't go to church. It's harder for the people that do go to church as well, because you're spending a lot of your time in church and you only have so much time. So I know a lot of people who don't belong to our church here in Utah feel like, oh, members of this church, like they don't care about people who aren't members of the church. And I think that might be true for some people, but overall, my feeling is that it's just you spend so much time in church and you only have so much time to go around. Yeah. We want to be friends with everybody. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of effort on either side or both sides.
Yeah, and I'll use the neighborhood that I grew up in as a perfect example. Growing up, there were a lot more members of the church than there are now. There's been a lot more people move into my parents' neighborhood now that are not members of the church, and actually, so growing up, people on both sides, both of our next door neighbors have rarely been members of our church. There was a time when one of our next door neighbors was members, but when I was very young, they sold that house and moved, and somebody else moved in, and the people on both sides were either not active in our church or were not members of our church, and still to this day that's the case. But growing up, I knew both of them. I mowed both of their lawns. We were friends with their kids, and we still had those relationships. We still got to know the neighbors right around us, and even now there are several people in that neighborhood that are not members of the church, but I know that the people in that neighborhood do a very good job of reaching out, and I'll shout out my parents on this one. They do a great job. They have inactive or non-members on both sides of them, and they know them very well, and the one side has little kids, and we come over on Sundays, and the little kids will come over and play with all of my nieces and nephews and my kids, and they have a great time. And I think I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but
Okay.
I think kids are like the greatest example that we can find of non-judgment.
Oh, definitely.
Spirituality
in general.
Spirituality in general. I look at kids, and I look at the way my kids play, and we hear a lot here in Utah about how people inside the church won't let their kids play with kids of families that are not members and things like that. But
That's so bizarre.
I agree, and I think there are people that are going to be that way, but I think it's the exception rather than the rule.
I agree.
And I look at my kids and their friend groups, and I've had some conversations with them about who their friends are and kind of what they do. And I know my oldest daughter has some friends who are Catholic, has friends who are LDS, has friends who are Christian, has friends who whatever religion they belong to. And I think it's amazing because these, as kids, they don't care.
Right.
They don't, like, one of the first questions you ask somebody isn't, hey, what ward are you in? Or
right.
What church do you go to? Or they really don't care. They run outside and they find a trampoline or they find a swing set and they just
want to play with
they
other
just want
kids.
to play.
Yeah.
They just want to play. And I think we as adults could learn so much just from that. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what color your hair is. It doesn't matter what you believe. If we're both outside, let's play.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I've really tried to do. I know at my last company I worked for, that was something that my supervisor commented on was, even though I was the only one on my team that went to church, that I didn't appear to be judgmental in any way, and I didn't feel judgmental. So I'm glad I portrayed what I was feeling. But I think it's really important to get to know everybody and to learn from everybody. That's no matter what religion you belong to, or if you don't belong to one, you can learn from other people's beliefs and their values.
Yeah, and I think on that same note, I think we can build ourselves up a little bit here. We can brag a little bit, right? But because I've spent a lot of time working in construction industry, and I was a firefighter, and I've done wildland firefighter for a couple of years. So I've dealt a lot with people outside of our church in the state, and I've found that it's actually a lot of places you can go where you will be the minority, actually, surprisingly enough. Contrary to popular belief, even though LDS is the majority here in Utah, you will find places that you can go and be the minority. One job that I was on several years ago, and we had some contractors from out of state, and none of them were LDS. None of them were really religious in any way I think some of them were religious in some form. But one of them, the superintendent, actually commented to me one time. He said, I'm going to read your Book of Mormon. He said, I'm not going to probably start going to church. I'm not going to get baptized. I'm not going to do any of that kind of stuff. But just because of the example of the two of you and the way that you've showed acceptance to us, he said, I really respect that. And I'm going to go give it a shot. And I'm going to read your book. I don't know what came of it. I've talked to him a handful of times over the last few years, and we haven't gotten onto the subject of religion. But I thought that was really cool, that just out of the example of acceptance and love, we were able to show that this idea, this perception of who our church is and what our members are can be overturned with one person showing that they're not that way.
Well, and I think there's a shout out to him as well, right? That's really impressive to me that he was willing to be that open-minded to read a book that's so important to you. And I think we should all be that way. Yeah. We should all be willing to learn about other people's beliefs, even if they seem to go against ours. Yeah. And just be open-minded.
Absolutely. I had a cousin growing up, and when I was in high school, I found out that he was a pagan. Well, I don't know if he was a pagan, but he was dating a pagan girl, and they were going to have a pagan wedding. And it intrigued me. When we were at my grandma's house one night, they were talking about their wedding, and they were being married by a priestess, and I'd never heard of any of this before. And so I actually went home that night and started researching paganism and Celtic religions and Wicca and some of these different things, and it fascinated me. And ever since then, I was probably 15 or 16, but ever since then, I've been fascinated with other spiritual practices. And so I've read books about samurai, and I've read books about Viking religion, and I've read books about Celtic, and it fascinates me, these different spiritual practices that are out there. So I think that's something that we can all do a little bit better with is being more open-minded and recognizing these other practices as valid and allowing them to be who they are.
Definitely. I think probably the last thing we want to touch on is how finding a sense of spirituality can help you find purpose in life. We all want to find purpose, right? So, do you want to talk about the three?
Yeah, so I think with that, I think most of us have, or probably most everybody has heard the three big questions in life, right? Who am I? Where did I come from? Where do we go from here? And I think any organized religion, any spiritual practice is going to help you find the answers to those questions. And for me, that was a big part of finding my spirituality and becoming a part of the groups that I've chosen to become a part of, is because they've helped me to figure that out, to find out who am I and what's my purpose here? What am I doing here? And then it also helps to establish those values and help us guide us through those decisions in life that we need to make. I mean, there's always big decisions in life, and as we get older, there's even bigger decisions and more of them coming our way, and it helps us to establish those values and helps guide us, gives us principles to guide us through those decisions along the way. So,
and I think it really doesn't matter too much if you die and you get to the other side of whatever's there and you realize that whatever you believed was wrong. I think what's important is how much did it help you become a better person? I think that's going to be the most important thing. When we die and we look back, it's going to be, how much did we improve? How much do we help others and take care of others? And so that's the whole purpose of spirituality.
And I think on that final note, I was actually having a conversation with my barber, who is barber shops are a great place to go to just have conversations, and it's kind of like therapy sometimes. I never realized this because my mom cut my hair. My mom's
I cut my hair, so I talked to myself while I did it.
well, my mom's a cosmetologist, and she cut my hair for a long time, but then I started growing the beard, and she doesn't do the beard, and so I started seeing a barber. And I never realized that what you see in TV shows and movies is actually fairly true of most barbershops. But I go to one where there's a single chair, so it's just me and the barber, and we can have these conversations. But it's funny, we were having this conversation a few months ago, and so he was LDS, served a mission, did all the things, and then doesn't go to church anymore, doesn't follow all of the same principles, but still has a high respect for people who are good people, whether they're members of our church or not. And it's funny, I can't remember what we were talking about, but he made a comment about, we're going to get to heaven, and there's going to be some Mormons there, but they're not going to be the only ones. And I think it's
not going to be like that Simpsons episode, or was it Simpsons or South Park? I think it was South Park episode where they're they're all in hell, and they're like, well, I was a Baptist and I was a Catholic. Who was right? And he's like, it was the Mormons. It's not going to be like that, right?
That's funny. Now I'm going to have to put a South Park episode in our show notes. All right. But yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's just like you said. It doesn't really matter necessarily what you follow. I think there's going to be a place for everybody who are good people. And if I think a lot of religions believe even in different areas or different levels of some kingdom, right? And regardless of which level you're in, I think there's a place for everybody. There's a place for everybody, and I think that's the important thing to keep in mind.
Definitely. Well, to wrap it up, we are going to issue our weekly challenge, and
love these challenges.
Me too. Sometimes I do them, and it's great. No, I try to do each of them for sure. So this week's challenge is to read a book, and that can be any book. I think most people will probably gravitate toward a spiritual book if you really felt like what you heard today was helpful. But just read a book. Read anything. Yep. I think it can even be a motivational, business-related book.
Yeah, I mean, we put usually book recommendations once a week. I think I missed it last week. I got thrown off a little bit with the holiday being on Monday, and so the stories didn't quite come out like I wanted them to last week. But we generally have a book recommendation every week, so there will be one up today, and feel free to read that book. Or, I mean, hey, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish is a great book. Great read. And there's another one, Dr. Seuss. Oh, The Places You'll Go.
Oh, yeah.
That one's
great.
Is fantastic.
I can read with my eyes shut. That one's a good one.
Yeah. So, any book. It doesn't have to be anything fancy even. Just pick up a book and read a book. I think as adults we have a hard time with that. I can't remember what the statistic is, but it was devastating when I found out how many books on average adults read after we're out of school and no longer are required to for book reports. So, but go ahead and read a book, and thank you again for listening. So give us that 5-star review if you like what you've heard, if something's resonated with you. Please, that's those reviews, those comments, those shares, those likes. That's how we're going to grow, and we would appreciate any help that we can get along the way.
Yeah, we'll have new episodes weekly on Mondays.
Yeah, where are we going to be? We're going to be Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Google, YouTube.
Yeah. Find us on all of those, on social media as well. And then join us again next week. We're going to talk about the fourth and final pillar. Again, not the least important, just the last in the order that we're doing them. And
some people are going to think that it's probably the most important.
Yeah, some people might think that, but you're wrong. They are all equally important.
That's true.
So it's financial health. So join us next week as we talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about money.
Money.